The pup should have spoken his first word to the Luna. In the royal hall. Before the entire pack. But when the child opened his mouth, he didn't look at the Alpha King. He didn't look at the woman everyone believed to be his mother. He looked at her. The Omega the kingdom mocked. The girl Alpha Rodrigo de Alcántara had rejected 3 years ago. And his first word, spoken softly, trembling like a prayer. Mama. Pequeño Mateo stood there in the doorway, clutching his lavender-scented blanket, tears streaking down his cheeks as if his wolf remembered what the kingdom tried to erase. The entire hall froze. The Luna's smile shattered. And Rodrigo's wolf fell to its knees. Before we dive into this heart-wrenching tale of rejection, redemption, and a love that refused to die, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you'll want to follow this journey to the end. And tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a virtual hug because you're going to need it. Now, let's go back to where it all began, because this story will change how you see second chances forever. 3 years earlier, the Alcántara pack territory sprawled across the hills of what humans called the Spanish countryside, though the wolves had claimed these lands long before any human settlement. The pack house stood like a fortress, stone and timber that had weathered 5 centuries of storms, wars, and the countless dramas of wolf politics. Rodrigo de Alcántara was everything an alpha should be. Tall, commanding, with dark hair that fell just past his shoulders and eyes like burnished gold. At 28, he'd led his pack through territorial disputes, economic hardship, and into an era of unprecedented prosperity. The Alcántara pack was respected, feared, and envied throughout the region. But an alpha needed a Luna. The elders reminded him constantly. The pack needed stability, needed the feminine balance to his masculine authority, needed pups to secure the bloodline. So when Inmaculada de Mendoza arrived for the annual gathering of packs, Rodrigo knew he'd found his perfect match. She was breathtaking, cascading black hair, emerald eyes, and a wolf form so pure white it seemed to glow under the full moon. More importantly, she came from the powerful Mendoza pack, bringing with her political alliances that would strengthen his territory's position significantly. Inmaculada was educated, poised, and carried herself with the regal bearing of someone born to lead. She spoke 4 languages, had studied pack law at the ancient academies, and could navigate pack politics with the skill of someone twice her age. Every alpha at the gathering watched her with hungry eyes, but she only had attention for Rodrigo. Their courtship was a whirlwind of political strategy and carefully orchestrated romance. She fit into his world seamlessly, already friends with the influential wolves in his pack, already making suggestions about pack management that showed her keen understanding of leadership. The elders approved. The council praised his choice. Even his beta, Fernando de Guzman, nodded his agreement, though something flickered in Fernando's eyes that Rodrigo couldn't quite read. The mating ceremony was planned for the autumn equinox, just 3 months away. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as it should be. Then Rodrigo met Paloma. It happened on a routine border patrol. Rodrigo rarely did these himself anymore. Alphas had people for such things, but something had called him out that morning. Restlessness, perhaps. Or fate laughing at his carefully constructed plans. She was gathering herbs near the stream that marked the eastern boundary of his territory. Small, delicate, with honey-brown hair that caught the sunlight and eyes like warm chocolate. She wore simple clothes, dirt under her fingernails, and when she looked up at him, there was no recognition of his status, no calculated interest. Just a startled gasp and the immediate scent of fear. Omega. She was an Omega wolf. In their world, wolves were born into their ranks. Alphas led, betas served as the backbone of pack structure, and Omegas. Omegas were rare, gentle souls meant for nurturing and peacemaking. They were cherished but never chosen for positions of power. An alpha mating an Omega was unheard of in the modern packs, a relic of ancient times when things were simpler. "I'm sorry, Alpha," she stammered, dropping her basket of herbs. "I didn't realize this was pack territory. I'll leave immediately." She was a rogue then, a wolf without a pack, surviving alone in the wilderness. It was dangerous for any wolf, but especially for an Omega. Rogues were often attacked, exploited, or worse. "What's your name?" Rodrigo found himself asking, though he should have simply escorted her off his land. "Paloma, Alpha. Paloma Ruiz." Something in his chest tightened. His wolf, usually so controlled, so disciplined, suddenly surged forward with interest. She smelled like the wild places, like rain and earth, and something indefinably sweet that made his head spin. "You're alone." She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. "My pack was destroyed 2 years ago. Raiders. I've been moving ever since." Every instinct screamed at him to protect her, to take her back to the pack house, to give her safety and security, to keep her close where nothing could harm her. His wolf was practically howling with the need. But he was promised to Inmaculada. He had responsibilities, plans, perfect Luna waiting for him. "There's a rogue-friendly territory 2 days south," he heard himself say, his voice cold and formal. "You should go there. Don't let me catch you on my lands again." The hurt that flashed across her face felt like claws raking across his heart. But she nodded, gathered her spilled herbs with shaking hands, and disappeared into the forest. Rodrigo told himself he'd done the right thing. He returned to the pack house, to Immaculada's perfectly planned dinner party, to discussions of mating ceremony details and political alliances. He ignored the way his wolf paced restlessly. He ignored the lingering scent of rain and earth that seemed to cling to his clothes. He ignored it for exactly 3 days. On the 4th day, he found himself back at that stream, tracking her scent without consciously deciding to do so. She'd made a small camp about a mile into the neutral zone, a pathetic little shelter made of branches and moss. She was stirring something in a dented pot over a weak fire, and when she saw him, she scrambled to her feet. "I left your territory, Alpha. I swear I haven't crossed." "Mate." His wolf spoke through his lips, the word rough and absolute. "You're my mate." The shock on her face mirrored what he felt in his soul. 'Cause it was true. Unmistakably, undeniably true. The mate bond, that sacred connection that couldn't be forced or faked, had formed between them. It sang in his blood, pulled at his heart, made every cell in his body scream that this small, dirt-smudged Omega was his other half. "No," Paloma whispered, backing away. "No, that's not possible. You're an Alpha. I heard about your mating ceremony. You have a Luna already." "Not yet," Rodrigo said, and he closed the distance between them. "The ceremony hasn't happened yet." That day by the stream, with sunlight filtering through the leaves and the sound of water over stones, Rodrigo allowed himself to feel something he'd never experienced with Immaculada. Real connection. Paloma was shy, self-conscious about her status, but when he coaxed her into conversation, he discovered a sharp mind behind those gentle eyes. She knew more about herbs and healing than his pack's official healer. She spoke about the forest like it was a living friend. And when she laughed at something he said, genuinely laughed, not the calculated tinkle of amusement Immaculada offered, it was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. For 2 weeks, Rodrigo lived a double life. By day, he was the Alpha, planning his mating ceremony with Immaculada, managing pack business, playing the role everyone expected. By night, he slipped away to Paloma's pitiful little camp, bringing her food, supplies, and gradually, his heart. She tried to resist. Gods, she tried. "This can't work," she told him one night, wrapped in his arms under the stars. "I'm an Omega. Even if you wanted me, your pack would never accept it. Alphas don't mate Omegas anymore." "I don't care about anymore," Rodrigo insisted. "I care about you. About us." But he did care. That was the poison truth he couldn't admit. Because every time he returned to the pack house, reality crashed back down. The wedding preparations, the political implications, the alliances that would crumble if he rejected Inmaculada de Mendoza for a rogue Omega nobody, the disappointment in the elder's eyes, the chaos it would cause. Fernando noticed something was wrong. His beta cornered him one evening in his office. "Whatever you're doing, Rodrigo, stop. Now." I don't know what you mean. You disappear every night. You smell like the forest. And you look at Inmaculada like she's a stranger. Fernando's eyes were hard. If you're having doubts, I'm not. Then what are you doing? Rodrigo couldn't answer. What was he doing? Falling in love with an Omega while engaged to a perfectly suitable Luna. It was madness. It was irresponsible. It would destroy everything he'd built. The decision came on a moonless night, exactly 1 week before the mating ceremony. Paloma sat by her fire, and Rodrigo could see she'd been crying. She looked up at him with those devastating brown eyes, and he knew she was going to say what he'd been dreading. You have to choose, she whispered. I can't keep doing this. Every time you leave it kills me a little more. And you will leave, Rodrigo. We both know you will. So please, if you have any mercy, make it quick. He'd come there intending to tell her he'd call off the ceremony. That he'd face down the council, the elders, the political fallout. That he'd choose her, choose the mate bond, choose love over duty. But standing there, looking at her hopeful, terrified face, all he could see was the disaster that would follow. Immaculada's pack withdrawing their alliance. The territory disputes that would reignite. The economic partnerships that would dissolve. The pack members who would question his judgment. His fitness to lead. His own family's legacy. 5 centuries of Alcántara alphas leading with strength and strategic brilliance, crumbling because he couldn't control his own heart. And Paloma. Sweet, gentle Paloma. She would be thrust into a role she'd never trained for, facing a pack that would resent her, dealing with political machinations she didn't understand. They would tear her apart. The pack wolves, with their carefully maintained hierarchies and old prejudices, would make her life hell. She'd be miserable, constantly reminded that she wasn't enough, wasn't what an alpha's mate should be. He was protecting her, he told himself. This was mercy. I reject you, Paloma Ruiz, as my mate. The words came out flat, emotionless, though they felt like he was ripping out his own heart. The mate bond, that beautiful, terrible thing, began to tear. Paloma made a sound like a wounded animal. She clutched her chest, doubled over with the pain of rejection. It wasn't just emotional. Breaking a mate bond caused physical agony, like every nerve ending was being set on fire. Why? She gasped out. You're an Omega. I'm an Alpha. It would never work. He forced ice into his voice, forced himself to say the cruelest thing he could think of because maybe that would make it easier for her to hate him. Did you really think I would choose you? That I would throw away everything for a rogue with nothing to offer? The devastation on her face would haunt him forever. But Rodrigo turned and walked away, leaving her sobbing by her dying fire, and told himself he'd done the right thing. The mating ceremony went ahead as planned. Inmaculada was radiant. The pack celebrated. Alliances were solidified. Everything was perfect, except Rodrigo felt dead inside. The mate bond, though rejected, left a scar on his soul. He functioned, led the pack, fulfilled his duties as a mated alpha, but it was all mechanical. Inmaculada seemed not to notice. Or perhaps she noticed and didn't care, satisfied with the position and power that came with being Luna of the Alcántara pack. She was, in fact, exactly what everyone had promised. Efficient, politically savvy, excellent at managing pack social affairs. She just wasn't warm, wasn't soft. Their mating was dutiful rather than passionate, a joining of positions rather than souls. A year after their mating ceremony, Inmaculada announced she was pregnant. The pack rejoiced. Rodrigo smiled and accepted congratulations and felt nothing but a dull sense of obligation. This was what alphas did. They produced heirs. Mateo was born on a cold winter night, and for the first time since he'd rejected Paloma, Rodrigo felt something crack in the ice around his heart. His son. His pequeño, with a tuft of dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn the same gold as his father's. In that moment, holding that tiny life, Rodrigo understood why people said pups changed everything. But Inmaculada wasn't interested in the messy reality of motherhood. She hired an army of nannies, wet nurses, and caregivers. She appeared for photo opportunities and pack events, the picture of maternal elegance, but the day-to-day reality of raising a pup? That was beneath a Luna of her status. Rodrigo found himself spending more time with Mateo than his own mate did. Late-night feedings, soothing cries, reading stories. These became the moments he lived for. Mateo was bright, curious, and affectionate in a way that made Rodrigo's chest ache with feelings he'd thought long dead. As Mateo grew from infant to toddler, certain things became clear. The boy was gentle, empathetic, showing none of the dominance expected of an alpha's son. He cried when other pups fought. He brought injured insects to his father to fix them. He had nightmares and needed comfort with a frequency that made Inmaculada purse her lips in disapproval. "He needs to be stronger," she said when Mateo was 3. "You're coddling him. He's the alpha heir. He should be learning to fight, to dominate, not crying over a dead bird." "He's 3 years old," Rodrigo shot back. "Let him be a child." But privately, he wondered if Inmaculada was right. The pack was already whispering, already questioning whether Mateo had the strength to lead one day. Then came the incident that changed everything. Mateo was 4 years old, and Inmaculada had decided he needed to start attending pack functions. There was a territorial meeting with a neighboring pack, tense negotiations over hunting rights. Mateo sat beside his mother, trying to be still and quiet as instructed. When tensions rose and voices escalated, when the visiting alpha's eyes flashed with challenge, Pequeño Mateo began to cry. Not loudly, but those quiet, distressed tears of an overwhelmed child. Immaculada's reaction was swift and cold. She grabbed their son by the arm, her nails digging in hard enough to leave marks, and dragged him from the room. Rodrigo heard Mateo's cry of pain and shock, heard Immaculada's harsh whisper. "Weak. Pathetic. You're an embarrassment." By the time Rodrigo made his excuses and followed them, Immaculada was gone, back to her social calendar, her political maneuvering, her life that had little room for a son who didn't meet her standards. Mateo sat alone in his room, clutching his arm where bruises were already forming, tears streaming silently down his face. Something in Rodrigo broke that day. Or maybe it finally healed. He looked at his son, this gentle, loving child who felt too much and loved too fiercely, and realized Mateo wasn't weak. He was like someone else. Someone Rodrigo had rejected and tried to forget. He was an omega. Rodrigo hadn't seen the signs because he hadn't wanted to. Mateo's rank would likely emerge around puberty, but all the indicators were there. The gentleness, the empathy, the way conflict and aggression wounded him. His son was going to be an omega in a pack that had been taught, by Rodrigo's own example, that omegas weren't valued. That night, holding his sleeping son, Rodrigo allowed himself to think about Paloma for the first time in years. Where was she now? Had she survived alone in the wild? Had she found another pack, another chance at happiness? The mate bond scar ached with the weight of what he'd thrown away. Over the following weeks, Rodrigo watched his son more carefully. Mateo played differently than the other pups. Less roughhousing, more careful games. He collected flowers and rocks, made up elaborate stories, and showed an unusual sensitivity to others' emotions. The other pups were starting to notice, starting to exclude him. And then, 3 months after the incident at the territorial meeting, Mateo disappeared. Rodrigo returned from a border inspection to find the packhouse in chaos. His son was gone, vanished. The nanny had turned her back for just a moment, and the 4-year-old had slipped away. The entire pack mobilized. They searched the grounds, the forest, every inch of territory. Rodrigo ran himself ragged, his wolf howling with fear, following every possible scent trail. Mateo was so small, so vulnerable. There were rogues, predators, 1,000 dangers for a lone pup in the wilderness. It was Fernando who found the trail leading east, to the old stream, to the border where, years ago, Rodrigo had first met. "No," Rodrigo breathed, but he was already running. The small shelter Paloma had built years ago was gone, but there was a cottage now in the neutral zone. Small, neat, with an herb garden and smoke rising from the chimney. And standing in the doorway, her hand on the shoulder of a small boy with tear-stained cheeks, was Paloma. She looked older, worn, but still beautiful in that quiet, gentle way that had once made his heart stop. And she was looking down at his son with an expression of such tender concern that Rodrigo felt like he'd been punched in the chest. "Papa!" Mateo cried when he saw Rodrigo, but he didn't run to him. He pressed closer to Paloma instead. "Papa, I found her. I found Mama." The world tilted. "Mateo, this isn't," Rodrigo started, but Paloma spoke first. "He wandered into my garden this afternoon," she said quietly, not meeting Rodrigo's eyes. "Lost and crying. I gave him some food, was just about to walk him back to Pac Lands." "I wasn't lost," Mateo insisted. "I was looking. The dreams told me to look. The lady who smells like moonflowers and makes the hurt stop. And I found her." He looked up at Paloma with absolute adoration. "She let me help with the plants, and she didn't get mad when I cried. And she sang the lullaby from my dreams. You're my mama, aren't you? My real mama." Paloma's eyes filled with tears. "Sweetling, I'm not. Why did you leave?" Mateo asked, and the question was aimed at Rodrigo. "Why did you make Mama go away?" How did he know? How could a 4-year-old possibly understand the complicated truth of rejected mate bonds and broken hearts? But standing there, seeing his son cling to the Omega Rodrigo had rejected, seeing the way Paloma's hands trembled as she tried to be kind to the child while clearly in pain from his mere presence, Rodrigo understood. The mate bond might have been rejected, but its echo remained. And somehow, impossibly, that echo had called to Mateo. His Omega son, seeking the Omega who should have been his mother. "Mateo, we need to go home," Rodrigo said, his voice rough. "No. I want to stay with Mama." "I'm not your mama, pequeño," Paloma said gently, though tears spilled down her cheeks. "Your mother is. She's not my mama. She doesn't smell right. She doesn't make the hurt stop." Mateo's small face was set with stubborn certainty. "You do. You're supposed to be my mama. Why won't you be my mama?" Rodrigo saw the moment Paloma's composure shattered. She knelt down, cupped Mateo's face with gentle hands. "Because your papa sent me away, sweetling. Because sometimes grown-ups make decisions that hurt everyone, and we all just have to live with them." Her eyes lifted to Rodrigo's then, and in them he saw 3 years of suffering. 3 years of surviving alone. 3 years of living with the agony of a rejected mate bond while he'd moved on with his perfect Luna and perfect life. Except it wasn't perfect. It had never been perfect. "Can you give us a moment?" Rodrigo asked Fernando, who'd arrived with the search party. His beta nodded, ushered the others back, though his expression said they'd be having words about this later. When they were alone, or as alone as they could be with a determined 4-year-old between them, Rodrigo finally let himself really look at Paloma. "You stayed. All this time you stayed near my territory." "I couldn't leave," she whispered. "The bond wouldn't let me go far. Even rejected, it pulled. So I made a life in the neutral zone. Helped passing rogues, grew my herbs, tried to survive." Her voice hardened. "But I didn't come looking for you. I didn't try to interfere with your perfect mating. It's not perfect. That's not my problem." "Mama, don't be sad," Mateo said, patting her cheek with his small hand. "Papa can fix it. Papa fixes everything. If only it were that simple. If only Rodrigo could wave his hand and undo 3 years of mistakes. But he'd made his choice. He'd rejected his true mate for political advantage. He'd built a life that looked right from the outside while being hollow at its core. And now that life was crashing down because his pup, his precious, empathetic Omega son, had somehow found the one person who could have loved him unconditionally. "I need to take him home," Rodrigo said. "But Paloma, can we talk? Really talk?" She shook her head. "There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice 3 years ago. I made the wrong choice. Then you have to live with it. Like I've been living with it. She gently turned Mateo toward his father. Go with your papa, sweetling. Forget about me. Forget the dreams. They're just dreams. But as Rodrigo lifted his protesting son into his arms, as he carried the sobbing child away from the cottage, both of them knew those weren't just dreams. The mate bond, even broken, had found a way to call out. And Mateo, pure and instinctive in the way only children could be, had answered. 4 days after, Mateo cried for Mama. He refused to eat, barely slept, and when he did sleep, he woke screaming from nightmares. Inmaculada was furious. Control your son, she snapped at Rodrigo. This is embarrassing. Everyone is talking about how he ran away to some rogue Omega. Do you know how that makes us look? He's 4 years old and confused. He's weak and you encourage it. This is exactly what I was afraid of. She leaned in, her voice venomous. He's going to be an Omega, isn't he? Your precious heir. All these political alliances, this perfect mating, and you've given me an Omega son who will never be strong enough to lead. Something snapped in Rodrigo. Get out. Excuse me. Get out of my sight before I say something we'll both regret. Inmaculada left in a whirl of expensive perfume and barely contained rage, and Rodrigo sat with his inconsolable son, stroking his hair, feeling the weight of his mistakes crushing him. Why can't Mama come home? Mateo whimpered. I miss her. Why did you send her away? How did you explain adult failures to a child? How did you say I was afraid? I chose position over love. I broke both our hearts because I thought it was the responsible thing to do. I made a mistake, Rodrigo said softly. A very big mistake. So fix it. You're the alpha. You can do anything. If only that were true. Fernando came to him that night after Mateo finally cried himself to sleep. His beta poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed one to Rodrigo, and sat down with the air of someone preparing for a difficult conversation. Tell me, Fernando said simply. So Rodrigo did. He told him about meeting Paloma, about the mate bond, about the choice he'd made and the 3 years of hollowness that had followed. He told him about finding Mateo at the cottage, about the way his son had looked at Paloma with recognition and love. When he finished, Fernando was quiet for a long moment. Then, you're an idiot. I know. The pack will fracture if you try to fix this now. Immaculada's family will retaliate. The alliances will crumble. I know that too. But you're going to do it anyway. It wasn't a question. Rodrigo looked at his beta, his oldest friend. I have to. My son is calling another woman Mama, Fernando. And the worst part is he's not wrong. That's who she was supposed to be. That's who I denied him by being a coward 3 years ago. So what's the plan? That was why Fernando was his beta. No judgment, no lecture. Just, what's the plan? I don't know yet. But I'm going to make this right. For Mateo. For Paloma. He took a long drink. And maybe, if I'm very lucky, for me. The next morning Rodrigo went to see Paloma. She was in her garden when he arrived, hands in the soil, the morning sun catching in her honey-brown hair. She looked up at his approach, and he saw her jaw tighten with determination. No. I haven't said anything yet. You don't need to. The answer is no. She stood, brushing dirt from her hands. Whatever you're going to ask, whatever you're going to say, no. I survived your rejection once, Rodrigo. I won't let you destroy me again. I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to beg your forgiveness. She laughed, but it was bitter. Forgiveness? For what? For choosing your perfect Luna. For telling me I wasn't good enough. For 3 years of silence. Her voice broke. For making me love you and then ripping my heart out? For all of it, Rodrigo said quietly. For being a coward. For choosing duty over my mate. For making the wrong choice and then being too proud to fix it. You can't fix it. You're mated to Immaculada. A mating without love. Without the bond. It's political theater, nothing more. That's not my problem. But Mateo isn't he? Rodrigo stepped closer. My son who calls you mama, who dreams of you, who found you across miles of territory because somehow he knew. He knew you were supposed to be his mother. Paloma's eyes glistened. Don't do this. Don't use your son to. I'm not using him. I'm stating facts. He's going to be an Omega, Paloma. Do you know what that means in our pack? In a world where even his own mother looks at him with disappointment. He needs you. He needs someone who understands what it means to be gentle in a harsh world. He needs the mother he was supposed to have. You should have thought of that 3 years ago. You're right. I should have. But I can't change the past. I can only try to fix the future. He reached for her hand and she let him take it, though she was trembling. I'm going to dissolve my mating with Inmaculada. I'm going to face the consequences, the political fallout, all of it. But I need to know. Is there any chance you could forgive me? Could give us another chance? The mate bond is broken, Rodrigo. You rejected me. Even if I wanted to, we can't just. Bonds can be rebuilt. Takes time, but it's possible. If both parties are willing. She pulled her hand away, wrapping her arms around herself. And what happens when your pack rebels? When the alliances fall apart? When you lose everything you worked for? Will you blame me then? Will you regret choosing the Omega after all? It was the heart of her fear, he realized. She'd watched him choose duty once. How could she trust he wouldn't do it again? I've spent 3 years regretting my choice, Rodrigo said. Every single day. The only thing I don't regret is Mateo. And he's the proof that I should have chosen you from the start. Because that beautiful, gentle, loving child is everything you are. He's proof that strength comes in forms I was too blind to see. Tears were streaming down Paloma's face now. I've been alone for 3 years. I've rebuilt myself piece by piece. And you're asking me to risk it all again. I know. And I have no right to ask. But I'm asking anyway. He pulled something from his pocket. A small carved wooden wolf, worn smooth by tiny hands. Mateo made this for you. He says it's a mama wolf to keep you safe until he can see you again. Paloma took the carving with shaking hands, and a sob broke free. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. I'm just asking for a chance to make it less unfair. She looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw the war between hope and fear. If I do this, if I even consider this, I need to know it's not just about Mateo. I need to know that you want me, not just a mother for your son. Rodrigo cupped her face in his hands, the way he'd dreamed of doing for 3 years. I have lived in a beautiful cage with a woman who looks perfect on my arm and makes me feel nothing. Every night, I've remembered the way you laughed. The way you saw the world. The way you made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt since I was young and stupid and thought being alpha meant having all the answers. He leaned his forehead against hers. You are my mate, Paloma. My true mate. The one I should have chosen 3 years ago. The one I'm choosing now, consequences be damned. This is going to destroy you politically. Then I'll build something new. With you. A pack that values all its members, not just the ones who fit old hierarchies. A pack where our son can be an Omega and still be valued, still be loved. You're insane. Probably. Is that a yes? She laughed through her tears. Ask me again after you've actually dissolved your mating. After you've proven you mean this. Then maybe I'll consider not being sensible. It wasn't the enthusiastic yes he'd hoped for, but it was hope. And that was more than he'd had in 3 years. The dissolution of a mating was messy, public, and exactly as politically catastrophic as everyone predicted. Immaculada's pack withdrew their alliance immediately. 3 council members resigned in protest. 2 neighboring packs, sensing weakness, began encroaching on border territories. But Rodrigo didn't back down. He stood before the pack and spoke truths that made everyone uncomfortable. About how he'd chosen political advantage over his mate bond. About how that choice had poisoned everything it touched. About how his son was being damaged by a mother who couldn't love him and a father who'd been too cowardly to choose differently. And then he said something that made the elders gasp in shock. My son is going to be an Omega. And if this pack has a problem with that, then I will take him and leave. Because I will not raise him in a world that tells him he's less than because of his nature. The declaration split the pack down the middle. Some agreed with Inmaculada that an alpha mating an Omega was a disgrace. Others, especially those who'd watched Mateo grow, who'd seen his gentle nature and kind heart, began to question the old hierarchies. Took 6 months to finalize everything. 6 months of political maneuvering, pack restructuring, and slowly, carefully, courting Paloma properly. Rodrigo visited her cottage every day, bringing small gifts, conversation, and gradually, the pieces of his heart he'd tried to lock away. He didn't push. Didn't demand. Just showed up consistently, proving that this time he wasn't going anywhere. Mateo visited too, whenever Rodrigo could manage it. The change in his son was remarkable. The nightmares stopped. The crying jags faded. In Paloma's presence, Mateo bloomed like a flower in sunlight, chattering about his day, helping with her garden, curling up in her lap for stories. She was careful never to claim the title he wanted to give her, but anyone watching could see the bond forming. He's yours, Rodrigo told her one evening as they watched Mateo chase fireflies in her garden. He chose you before he even met you. Somehow he knew. The mate bond, Paloma said softly. Even broken, it left echoes. He felt them. Cold to them. She was quiet for a moment. I never thought I'd have pups. After you rejected me, I tried to accept that I'd be alone forever. And now? Now you have a 4-year-old who loves you with his whole heart. And an alpha who's trying to earn back your trust. Rodrigo reached for her hand, and this time she laced her fingers through his without hesitation. Tell me what I need to do. Tell me how to prove this is real. You're already doing it, she said. Showing up. Being consistent. Not running when things get hard. She looked at him, and in her eyes he saw the walls beginning to crumble. Do you know what the hardest part has been? Not the loneliness. Not the pain of rejection. It's been watching you from a distance, knowing you were so close but completely unreachable. Seeing you build a life that should have been ours. I'm so sorry, mi Luna. For all of it. Stop apologizing and just keep being here. That's all I need. The pack finally stabilized under new leadership structure. Fernando stepped up as head beta, essentially running day-to-day operations while Rodrigo focused on damage control and rebuilding. They lost some members, those too wedded to the old ways, but gained others. Rogues who'd heard about an alpha who valued all ranks. Families with Omega children who'd been marginalized in their previous packs. Slowly, the Alcántara pack transformed into something different. Something better. 8 months after that day Mateo had run away, Rodrigo took Paloma and his son to the same stream where he'd first met her. It was spring, and the air smelled of new growth and possibilities. Mateo splashed in the shallows, laughing, while Rodrigo knelt before Paloma. I know I don't deserve you, he said. I know I destroyed your trust and broke your heart. But I'm asking anyway. Will you be my mate? My Luna? My everything? Paloma looked at him for a long moment, then at Mateo, who'd stopped playing to watch with huge, hopeful eyes. That depends. Are you asking because of him or because of us? Both. Always both. He deserves you as his mother. And I don't deserve you, but I'm selfish enough to want you anyway. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a life where our son can be exactly who he is without shame. I want to spend the rest of my life making up for the 3 years I wasted. You can't make up for lost time. No. But I can make sure we don't waste any more of it. She smiled then, really smiled, the way she had that first day by the stream when the world had been simpler. Then yes. Yes, I'll be your mate. Your Luna. But only if you promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll never choose duty over love again. That if things get hard, and they will get hard, you won't run. You won't sacrifice us for politics or appearances or whatever reason seems good in the moment. I promise, Rodrigo said, and he meant it with everything in him. Never again. You and Mateo, you're my priority. Everything else is just details. Mateo let out a whoop of joy and came splashing through the water, throwing his wet little body into both of them. Does this mean Paloma can really be my mama now? Really, truly. Paloma laughed through happy tears, pulling him close. Really, truly, pequeño. If you'll have me. I've been waiting forever, Mateo said with the dramatic exasperation of a 4-year-old. You're so slow, Papa. The mating ceremony was nothing like Rodrigo's first one. No political dignitaries, no elaborate staging. Just the core pack members who'd chosen to stay, gathering in the forest clearing under the full moon. Paloma wore a simple dress woven with wildflowers, and when she pledged herself to Rodrigo, when they sealed the bond that should have been sealed years ago, the rightness of it sang through his entire being. The mate bond rebuilt itself slowly, carefully, like new growth over scar tissue. It would never be as if the rejection hadn't happened. They both carried those scars, but it grew stronger each day. And with it came a peace Rodrigo had never felt with Inmaculada. This was what a true mating felt like. Not performance, not obligation, but genuine partnership. Paloma challenged him when he fell back into authoritarian patterns. She gently suggested new approaches to pack management that incorporated the voices of omegas and lower-ranked wolves. She turned their rigid hierarchy into something more fluid, more compassionate, more real. And Mateo thrived. With Paloma as his mother, he grew more confident in his gentle nature. She taught him that strength came in many forms, that comfort given to a hurting packmate was as valuable as winning a fight. That his empathy was a gift, not a weakness. That the world needed wolves like him just as much as it needed alphas and fighters. When Mateo was 6, his omega status confirmed itself beyond doubt. His wolf emerged during a full moon ceremony, small and golden brown, radiating that distinctive omega gentleness. Some of the older pack members still whispered, still questioned how an alpha's heir could be an omega. Rodrigo addressed it head-on in the next pack meeting. My son is an omega. And when I'm gone, he will lead this pack if he chooses. Because I've learned something these past years. Leadership isn't about dominance. It's about understanding your people, caring for them, making decisions that serve everyone, not just the strong. And no one understands those principles better than omegas. It was revolutionary, controversial. But slowly, the pack began to see what Rodrigo saw. Mateo had inherited his father's intelligence and his mother's emotional wisdom. He mediated disputes between pack members with a skill beyond his years. He noticed when someone was struggling and offered help without being asked. He was going to be an extraordinary leader precisely because he was an omega. 3 years after their mating, Paloma gave Rodrigo a daughter. Little Isabella was an alpha from the moment she first shifted. Fierce, bold, protective of her gentle older brother. The pack adored her, but she adored Mateo. She followed him everywhere, and he taught her the same lessons Paloma had taught him. That strength without compassion was just cruelty. Together they were the future. An omega and an alpha, sibling leaders who would transform what it meant to be a pack. But that future almost never happened. Because 2 months after Isabella's birth, Inmaculada returned. She arrived with an army at her back. Her family's pack, reinforced by 2 allied packs who'd never accepted Rodrigo's dissolution of their mating. She demanded to see Rodrigo, standing at the border of his territory with enough wolves to start a war. You humiliated me, Inmaculada said when Rodrigo met her at the border, Fernando and a contingent of warriors at his back. You threw me away for a rogue omega. Made me a laughingstock among the packs. I ended a mating that was built on lies, Rodrigo replied calmly. We never loved each other, Inmaculada. You wanted position, I wanted alliances. Neither of us wanted each other. That doesn't give you the right to destroy my reputation. What do you want? An apology? Reparations? Her smile was cold. I want my son. The world stopped. Mateo is not your son, Rodrigo said, his voice deadly quiet. Biologically, he is. And legally, under traditional pack law, the heir belongs with the original Luna if a mating is dissolved. I'm here to collect what's mine. It was technically true, an archaic law from centuries past that no one had invoked in generations. The heir stayed with the bloodline Luna to prevent political manipulation through mating and dissolving. But it had never been meant for situations like this. You don't want him, Rodrigo said. You never wanted him. You barely acknowledged his existence when we were mated. That's irrelevant. He's the heir to the Alcántara line. That makes him valuable, even if he is disappointingly weak. A shrug. My family believes they can train that out of him. Make him into a proper alpha. Or at least useful for political marriage. Over Rodrigo's dead body. You're not taking him. Then we go to war. Inmaculada gestured to her forces. I have 3 packs behind me. You've hemorrhaged members since your reformation. How long do you think you'll last? Not long. That was the brutal truth. Rodrigo's pack was stronger spiritually, but numerically they were outmatched. A war would devastate them. But he'd promised Paloma he wouldn't sacrifice his family for political concerns. He'd promised himself he'd protect his son, no matter the cost. We'll fight, Rodrigo said. Every last one of us. How noble. And how will you explain to that Omega of yours that you got her killed for a principle? Inmaculada's eyes glittered with malice. Because make no mistake, Rodrigo. If we go to war, she dies first. I'll make sure of it. The threat hung in the air like poison. Rodrigo's wolf snarled, desperate to tear her throat out, but he forced himself to remain calm. Give me 24 hours. To consider terms. 12 hours. Then I start killing your border patrols. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Rodrigo. Tell Mateo I'm looking forward to reuniting with my son. I'm sure he's missed his real mother. The council meeting that followed was chaos. Everyone shouting suggestions, arguing strategy, fear and fury mixing into a toxic brew. They could fight, probably would have to fight, but the casualties would be catastrophic. There has to be another way, Paloma said quietly. She'd been silent through most of the arguing, but now every eye turned to her. Some way to resolve this without war. She wants Mateo, Fernando said bluntly. The only way to avoid war is to give him up. No, Rodrigo snarled. That's not an option. I'm not suggesting we do it. I'm stating the terms. Paloma stood, walked to the center of the room. She looked small among all these warriors and politicians, but her voice was steady. What if we challenge the law itself? Traditional pack law allows challenges, doesn't it? If someone believes a law is unjust. In theory, one of the elders said slowly. But challenges have to be recognized by the Council of Alphas. And they take months to organize. We don't have months. Then what are you suggesting? Rodrigo asked. Paloma looked at him, and in her eyes he saw a plan forming. A desperate, dangerous plan. I challenge Inmaculada for the right to be Mateo's mother. Combat. Single combat between the 2 Lunas for custody of the heir. Absolutely not, Rodrigo said immediately. You're not a fighter, Paloma. She'd kill you. Maybe. But it's pack law. She can't refuse without looking weak. And it buys us time. The challenge would have to be held under neutral oversight, which means assembling witnesses, following proper protocol. That's at least a week, maybe 2. Time for us to find a better solution. Or time for you to train for a fight you can't win. Rodrigo shook his head. I won't let you do this. It's not your choice. Paloma's voice was gentle but firm. I'm Mateo's mother. I won't let him be taken by someone who sees him as a political tool. If there's even a chance this works, I have to try. The room erupted in argument again, but Rodrigo barely heard it. He was looking at his mate, this woman who'd survived rejection and loneliness and built herself back up, and now she was offering to face down a trained alpha fighter for their son. "There has to be another way," he said desperately. "Then find it in the next 12 hours. But Rodrigo, if you can't." She took his hand. "I need you to trust me to fight for our family." He wanted to forbid it, to lock her away somewhere safe and face Inmaculada himself. But he'd promised never to choose duty over love, and love meant respecting Paloma's strength, even when it terrified him. "If we do this," he said finally, "we do it right. Fernando, find every fighting trainer we have. Paloma trains every waking moment. And someone get me the exact wording of the challenge law. There has to be something we can use." The next 12 hours were a blur of desperate preparation. Paloma began intensive training with the pack's best fighters. Rodrigo and Fernando pored over ancient pack law texts, looking for any loophole, any advantage. And Mateo, too young to fully understand but sensing the tension, clung to his mother whenever he could. "Mama, why are you learning to fight?" he asked, watching Paloma go through combat drills with painful slowness. "To keep you safe, pequeño." "But Papa can keep me safe. He's the alpha." Paloma knelt down, cupped his worried little face. "Sometimes mamas need to fight too. Sometimes the best way to show love is to stand between your child and danger. I don't want you to get hurt." "I won't. I promise." A promise she couldn't keep, but she made it anyway because he needed to hear it. When the 12 hours were up, Rodrigo went to the border alone. Inmaculada was waiting, looking pleased with herself. "Have you come to hand over the boy?" "I've come to deliver a challenge." Paloma Ruiz de Alcántara, Luna of this pack and recognized mother of Mateo de Alcántara, challenges your claim under the law of maternal right. Single combat, neutral ground, witnessed by the Council of Alphas. Winner takes custody. Immaculada's eyes narrowed. That law hasn't been invoked in centuries. But it still stands. Unless you're refusing the challenge. She laughed. "Why would I refuse? I'll enjoy tearing apart your little Omega mate. But know this, Rodrigo. When I take Mateo, I'm going to make sure he forgets she ever existed. I'll train every soft, weak part of him away until he's a proper alpha. Or I'll break him trying." It took everything Rodrigo had not to shift and attack her right there. But pack law was sacred. Break it, and he'd lose any moral authority he had left. 2 weeks, he gritted out. For the council to assemble. 2 weeks. Inmaculada agreed. Tell your Omega to make peace with whatever god she believes in. She's going to need them. Those 2 weeks were the longest of Rodrigo's life. Paloma trained until she collapsed, pushed herself beyond any reasonable limit. She'd never be as strong as Inmaculada, never as fast. But she learned to use her size as an advantage, learned to evade rather than confront directly, learned dirty tricks that made the traditional fighters wince. "You're not trying to win with honor," Fernando told her after a particularly brutal training session. "You're trying to survive." "I'm trying to keep my son," Paloma corrected, spitting blood. "Honor is a luxury I can't afford." Rodrigo wanted to stop it, wanted to call off the whole thing and just run with his family, but Paloma wouldn't let him. She'd found something in herself these 2 weeks, a core of steel beneath the gentleness. She'd been underestimated her whole life for being an Omega. This was her chance to prove that soft didn't mean weak. The night before the challenge, she and Rodrigo lay together in their bed, Mateo asleep between them. His small body rose and fell with peaceful breaths, unaware that tomorrow his whole world might shatter. "If I lose," Paloma started, but Rodrigo put a finger to her lips. "You won't. If I lose," she continued gently, "you need to promise me something. Don't let Inmaculada break him. Find a way to get him back, even if it takes years. Remind him that he was loved exactly as he is. That his gentleness is strength, not weakness." "Paloma, promise me, Rodrigo. Because I need to go into that ring tomorrow knowing that even if I fail, you'll keep fighting for him." "I promise," he whispered, pulling her close. "But you're not going to fail. You're the strongest person I know." She laughed softly. I'm an Omega going up against an Alpha fighter. The odds aren't exactly in my favor. The odds weren't in my favor when I met you either. I was supposed to mate Immaculada, live a safe political life. Instead, I got my heart broken, rebuilt a pack from scratch, and found out what real love actually feels like. He kissed her forehead. You've always defied the odds, mi Luna. Tomorrow will be no different. The challenge was held in a neutral clearing, witnessed by 12 alphas from various packs and overseen by the Council of Elders. Hundreds of wolves gathered to watch, some supporting Rodrigo's reformed pack, others eager to see the upstart Omega put in her place. Immaculada entered the ring in full fighting gear, every inch the warrior Luna. She was magnificent and terrifying, moving with the deadly grace of someone who'd trained for combat her entire life. Paloma entered wearing simple clothes, looking impossibly small in comparison. But her eyes were steady, focused. She'd spent 2 weeks preparing for this moment. The rules were simple. Wolf form, no outside interference, fight until one submitted or died. Merciful challenges allowed for submission. Immaculada had specifically requested no mercy rule. Rodrigo felt sick. The elder overseeing the challenge raised his hand. This challenge is recognized under the law of maternal right. The question before us: who holds the rightful claim to custody of Mateo de Alcántara? His birth mother, Inmaculada de Mendoza, or his recognized mother, Paloma Ruiz de Alcántara? The challenge will be decided by combat. Shift. Both women transformed. Immaculada's wolf was huge, pure white, beautiful and deadly. Paloma's was smaller, golden brown, the typical Omega build. The size difference was stark. The elder dropped his hand. Begin. Immaculada attacked immediately, going for the throat in a classic killing move. But Paloma wasn't there. She'd rolled aside, using her smaller size to stay mobile. Immaculada's next 3 attacks met empty air. Stop running and fight, you coward. Immaculada snarled. Paloma didn't answer, just kept moving, evading, staying out of reach. She was fighting smart, letting Immaculada exhaust herself with failed attacks. But she couldn't keep it up forever. The first hit came 10 minutes in. Immaculada finally caught Paloma with a vicious swipe that sent her tumbling. Blood stained her golden fur. The crowd gasped. Rodrigo started forward, but Fernando grabbed his arm. She has to do this herself. You interfere, they forfeit her claim. So Rodrigo watched in agony as Immaculada pressed her advantage, landing hit after hit. Paloma fought back when she could, but the power difference was too great. She was losing. Badly. Submit. Immaculada growled, pinning Paloma to the ground. Submit and I'll make it quick. Paloma's response was to sink her teeth into Immaculada's leg. Not a killing blow, but painful enough to make the larger wolf release her. Paloma scrambled away, limping now, bleeding from a dozen wounds. She couldn't win. Everyone watching knew it. This was just prolonging the inevitable. But Paloma didn't submit. She kept fighting, kept evading, kept refusing to give up even as her body failed her. Because mothers didn't give up on their children. Even when they couldn't win, they fought anyway. Why won't you just die? Immaculada screamed, frustrated now. She'd expected an easy victory, but Paloma's sheer stubborn refusal to quit was making her look bad. Because he's my son, Paloma said, her wolf's voice carrying across the clearing. And I will fight for him until I have no breath left. The words resonated. In the watching crowd, Rodrigo saw expressions changing. Saw the other wolves, especially the mothers, looking at Paloma with something like respect. This wasn't about combat skill anymore. This was about a mother's love made manifest. Immaculada saw it too. Saw her narrative slipping away. She'd wanted to show strength, but instead, she was beating down a wounded Omega who refused to yield. It didn't make her look powerful. It made her look monstrous. Fine. Immaculada snarled. If you won't submit, I'll just kill you. She lunged for Paloma's throat one final time. Killing blow unavoidable. Rodrigo's heart stopped. But a small golden wolf burst into the ring. No, don't hurt my mama. He'd shifted, the first time he'd ever fully transformed, and thrown himself between Paloma and Inmaculada. His tiny wolf body shook with fear and determination. The entire clearing went silent. "Mateo, get out of the ring," the elder commanded, but the boy didn't move. "She's my mama," Mateo said, his young voice clear and unwavering. "My real mama. The one who sings to me when I'm scared and teaches me about plants and tells me I'm perfect just how I am. You can't have me. I choose her." It wasn't legally binding. A 4-year-old's choice shouldn't override pack law. But there was something profound about watching this Omega pup, this gentle child, stand up to an alpha fighter to protect his mother. And Inmaculada knew it. Knew that if she struck Mateo to get to Paloma, she'd lose every shred of sympathy from the watching packs. Knew that maternal challenge or not, killing a child who'd thrown himself in harm's way would mark her as a monster. "This is interference," she said to the elder. "The challenge should be forfeit." But the elder was staring at Mateo with an expression of wonder. The child has chosen. Under the law of maternal right, the heir's choice is considered, particularly when that choice is made clear and public. He's 4 years old. Old enough to shift. Old enough to speak his truth. The elder looked between Inmaculada and Paloma, still bleeding on the ground with her son shielding her. "The challenge is decided. Paloma Ruiz de Alcántara's claim is recognized. She is the true mother, chosen by the child himself." The crowd erupted. Some in approval, others in outrage. But the decision was made. Inmaculada shifted back to human form, fury twisting her beautiful features. "This isn't over, Rodrigo. You've humiliated me for the last time." "You humiliated yourself," Rodrigo said, finally able to rush to Paloma's side. She'd shifted back too, bloody and bruised, but alive. So wonderfully alive. "You never wanted Mateo. You wanted revenge. And you lost. We'll see about that." Inmaculada stalked away, her supporters following. The threat lingered, but for now it was over. Rodrigo gathered his family, his battered mate and his shaking son, and held them close. "You scared 10 years off my life," he told Mateo, but there was no anger in his voice, only overwhelming relief and pride. "I had to protect Mama," Mateo said simply. "That's what you do when you love someone." From the mouth of babes, Paloma healed slowly, her body recovering faster than her spirit. The challenge had taken something from her, had shown her exactly how close she'd come to losing everything. For weeks after, she'd wake with nightmares, reliving those moments of impact, of pain, of thinking she'd failed her son. But Mateo was there every time, crawling into bed between his parents, his small presence a reminder of why she'd fought at all. The other pack's reaction was mixed. Some saw Paloma's victory as a fluke, a technicality. But others began to reconsider their own hierarchies. If an Omega could fight an Alpha for her child, if that gentleness could translate into such fierce determination, maybe strength looked different than they'd thought. Rodrigo's pack grew. Not rapidly but steadily. Wolves who were tired of rigid hierarchies, tired of being told their nature made them lesser, began to find their way to the Alcántara territory. Within a year, they'd recovered the numbers they'd lost and more. And the pack changed shape. No longer was it strictly divided into Alpha, Beta, Omega. Leadership emerged from capability and wisdom, not just dominance. Omegas took on roles beyond nurturing. Healing, yes, but also diplomacy, teaching, even strategic planning. Because it turned out that emotional intelligence was its own form of power. Mateo grew up in this new world, surrounded by wolves who valued him for exactly who he was. He learned to fight because even gentle souls needed to defend themselves, but he also learned negotiation, mediation, and healing. He became the bridge between the old ways and the new, respected by traditional packs and reformed ones alike. When he was 12, a group of young Omegas from a neighboring pack showed up at the border, asking for sanctuary. They'd been mistreated, undervalued, told they were barely better than humans. Mateo met them personally, welcomed them, and helped them find their place in the Alcántara pack. "This is what you fought for," Rodrigo told Paloma, watching their son with pride. "Not just him but all of them. A world where omegas don't have to be ashamed of what they are." "We fought for it," Paloma corrected. "You gave up everything you'd built to choose differently." "Best decision I ever made." Rodrigo pulled her close, marveling that she still fit perfectly against him after all these years. "Well, second best. The best decision was finally growing a spine and coming to find you after Mateo ran away." She laughed. "Our son, the matchmaker. Maybe that's his real gift, seeing what people need before they know it themselves." As if summoned by their discussion, Mateo appeared with little Isabella in tow. She was 7 now, all alpha attitude and fierce protectiveness of her older brother. They were arguing about something, probably her wanting to fight someone and him trying to talk her out of it, but the love between them was obvious. "Papa, tell Bella she can't challenge the alpha heir from the Cortez pack just because he said omegas shouldn't lead," Mateo said exasperatedly. "Why not?" "He's wrong and stupid and needs to be taught a lesson," Isabella shot back. "Because there are better ways to change minds than violence." "Name one." "Proving him wrong by being an amazing leader." Rodrigo and Paloma exchanged amused glances. This was a familiar argument. "You're both right," Rodrigo said diplomatically. "Bella, violence should be a last resort." Mateo, "Sometimes people need a demonstration of strength before they'll listen to wisdom." "How about a compromise?" "What kind of compromise?" they asked simultaneously. "Mateo, you challenge him to a debate. Make your case for why omegas can lead just as well as alphas. And Bella, you stand as his second. If the Cortez heir gets violent or disrespectful, then you can demonstrate why underestimating our family is a bad idea." The siblings looked at each other, then nodded. "Okay. We can work with that." They ran off to plan their strategy, and Paloma shook her head with a smile. "They're going to change the world, aren't they?" "They already are," Rodrigo said. "One challenged prejudice at a time." Life settled into something Rodrigo had never experienced before. Contentment. Not the shallow satisfaction of political success, but deep, genuine happiness. His pack was thriving. His children were growing strong. And every night, he fell asleep next to his true mate, the woman he should have chosen from the very beginning. But the past had a way of resurging when you least expected it. Mateo was 15 when Inmaculada made her final play. She'd spent years building a coalition of traditional packs, all of them opposed to Rodrigo's reforms. They didn't attack directly, they were smarter than that. Instead, they began spreading stories about how the Alcántara pack had grown weak, how their omega heir was a sign of degeneration, how they were abandoning the old ways that had kept wolf society strong for millennia. It was propaganda, plain and simple. But it was effective. Some of Rodrigo's allied packs began to distance themselves. Economic partnerships dissolved. They found themselves increasingly isolated. "She's trying to strangle us politically," Fernando observed during a council meeting. "Cut us off until we either fall in line or fall apart. We don't have the military strength to fight a coalition," another council member added. "If they decide to invade." "They won't," Mateo said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He rarely spoke in council meetings, preferring to listen and learn. But now his young face was set with determination. "Because I'm going to challenge her narrative directly." "How?" Rodrigo asked. "The grand gathering is in 3 months. Every pack sends representatives. It's the perfect platform." Mateo stood, and despite his youth, he had presence. "I'll speak. I'll make the case for why our way is not weakness but evolution. Why valuing all ranks makes us stronger, not weaker." "They'll tear you apart," Paloma said, fear in her voice. "Mateo, you're 15. These are alphas who've led for decades. They won't listen to an omega pup." Mateo finished gently. "You're right, they won't want to listen. But they'll have to, because I'm the heir to the Alcántara pack. Pack law says I get my voice. He looked at his parents. You both risked everything for me. For the idea that I could be myself and still be worthy of leading. Now let me fight for that. My way. The grand gathering was held in neutral territory, an ancient clearing that had hosted these meetings for centuries. Hundreds of wolves from dozens of packs assembled, including Inmaculada with her coalition. When Mateo stood to speak, the clearing went quiet with shock. A teenage Omega, daring to address the assembled alphas. It was unprecedented. My name is Mateo de Alcántara, he began. His voice steady despite the hostile eyes on him. I'm an Omega, the heir to my pack. And I'm here to tell you that everything you think you know about strength is wrong. Muttering erupted, but Mateo continued. You think strength is dominance, aggression, the ability to defeat enemies. And yes, those things have their place. But what happens when the fight is over? What happens when your people are hurting, traumatized, lost? You need someone who can heal, who can listen, who can help them find peace. That's Omega strength. Pretty words from someone who's never had to really fight, an alpha called out. You're right, Mateo agreed calmly. I avoid fighting when possible. But my mother, an Omega, fought an alpha in single combat to protect me. She couldn't win with strength, so she won with endurance, with refusal to quit, with love that was stronger than fear. Tell me that's not strength. Paloma, sitting with Rodrigo in the audience, felt tears prick her eyes. My pack doesn't just value Omegas, Mateo continued. We value every wolf according to their gifts. Our best strategist is a beta. Our most skilled healer is an Omega. Our fiercest warrior is my sister, an alpha who learned compassion from her Omega brother. We don't restrict wolves based on their rank. We help them develop their actual strengths. That's chaos, Inmaculada said, standing. Pack structure exists for a reason. When you blur the lines, you lose cohesion. No, you gain flexibility, Mateo countered. You gain wolves who are fulfilled, who can contribute their best. You think our pack is weak? Come visit. See our prosperity, our happiness, our unity. Then tell me traditional hierarchies are superior. One pack's experiment doesn't prove anything. Then let other packs experiment too. Let Omegas lead in their areas of strength. Let Betas command when they have the best strategic mind. Let Alphas do what Alphas do best. Protect, without assuming that's the only form of leadership that matters. Mateo looked around the clearing, meeting eyes. Our world is changing. Humans encroach on our territories. Resources grow scarce. We need to adapt or die. And adaptation starts with recognizing that we've been wasting half our pack's potential by locking wolves into rigid roles. He sat down and the silence was deafening. Then an old alpha, leader of one of the most traditional packs, stood up. The pup has a point. More muttering, but this time thoughtful rather than hostile. My pack has 3 Omegas, the old alpha continued. Good wolves. But we don't let them contribute beyond nursing pups and gardening. Waste of potential, maybe. Worth considering at least. Other alphas began standing, adding their thoughts. Not all positive, some still vehemently opposed, but the conversation had shifted. Mateo hadn't won everyone over, but he'd planted seeds of doubt in the traditional narrative. Inmaculada saw her coalition fracturing and played her final card. This is all very inspiring, but let's not forget why the Alcántara pack reformed in the first place. Because their alpha rejected his perfect Luna for a rogue Omega. Because he put personal desire above pack welfare. That's not evolution, it's selfishness. Rodrigo stood. You're right. I did choose personal desire. I chose my true mate over political convenience. And yes, it cost us allies and stability. But you know what we gained? We gained authenticity. We gained a pack where wolves don't have to pretend to be something they're not. We gained my son, who just gave a better speech on leadership than I've heard from most alphas twice his age. He looked at Inmaculada directly. You wanted to make this about my choices. Fine. I reject you formally and publicly all over again. Because every day since I chose Paloma, I've been more of an alpha, more of a leader, and more of a father than I ever was with you. The clearing erupted in chaos, some wolves cheering, others shouting in outrage. But Inmaculada had gone pale. Because Rodrigo hadn't just defended his choice. He'd turned it into a declaration of values that resonated with more wolves than she'd anticipated. The grand gathering didn't end with a clear victory for either side. But it ended with something more important: doubt. Doubt in the old ways. Curiosity about the new ones. And an invitation extended by several alphas from Mateo to visit their packs, to share his perspectives with their own young wolves. You did it, Paloma told her son that night, holding him close. You changed minds. I just told the truth, Mateo said. About us. About what's possible when you don't limit people based on what they're born as. That's all I ever wanted, Rodrigo said, pride thick in his voice. For you to have the freedom to be exactly who you are. And for you to use that to help others find the same freedom. Over the next 5 years, the wolf world slowly transformed. Not everywhere, not completely, but enough. Packs began experimenting with more flexible hierarchies. Omegas found themselves in leadership positions they'd never dreamed possible. And the Alcántara pack became a model. Not perfect, still figuring things out, but proof that a different way could work. Mateo grew into his role as heir with a quiet confidence that commanded respect without demanding it. At 20, when Rodrigo finally stepped down as alpha, the pack's acceptance of their Omega leader was unanimous. There were still those in other packs who sneered, who waited for him to fail, but Mateo led with the same combination of strength and gentleness that had always defined him. Isabella became his beta, a reversal of traditional roles that would have been scandalous a generation earlier. She was the sword to his shield, the aggression to his diplomacy. Together they were formidable. Rodrigo and Paloma stepped back from active leadership, but not from pack life. They became advisors, mentors to young mated pairs trying to navigate the complexities of wolf relationships. Rodrigo, in particular, counseled young alphas who struggled with the weight of expectations. I wasted 3 years of my life trying to be what everyone else wanted, he told them. Don't make my mistake. Find your true mate, not your convenient one. Build the pack you want, not the one you inherited. Be brave enough to change when change is needed. Some listened. Some didn't. But enough did that the ripples kept spreading. On a quiet evening 25 years after that day, Mateo had run away to find his mama. Rodrigo and Paloma sat by the same stream where they'd first met. They were older now, silver threading through their hair, lines earned from years of laughter and worry, but the mate bond between them burned as bright as ever. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd never rejected me? Paloma asked, trailing her fingers in the water. If you'd chosen me from the start. Every day, Rodrigo admitted. We'd have avoided so much pain. But would we have changed the pack? Would Mateo have become the leader he is if he hadn't seen both of us fight for him? I don't know. I just know that I wouldn't trade what we have now for anything. Not even an easier path to get here. Me neither. Rodrigo pulled her close. You gave me everything, mi Luna. A real partnership. Children who are changing the world. A life that means something beyond political maneuvering and territory disputes. You gave me purpose. You gave me a home, Paloma said softly. After years of being alone, of thinking I'd never belong anywhere, you gave me a place where I wasn't just accepted but valued. Where my son could grow up proud of what he is. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the water, until Mateo's voice called from the forest path. Mama, Mpa, you're going to want to see this. They found him in a clearing with Isabella, and between them stood a young woman. Small, delicate, with eyes that held both fear and hope. An Omega clearly. And from the way Mateo couldn't stop looking at her, from the way his whole body oriented toward her unconsciously. This is Elena, Mateo said, and his voice held a wonder that Rodrigo remembered from his own first meeting with Paloma. She's from the Valdez pack. I think she's your mate, Paloma finished, smiling. She could see it in the way the girl looked at Mateo, in the invisible thread that already connected them. The Valdez pack is traditional, Elena said nervously. Very traditional. When they found out I'm Mateo's mate, She swallowed hard. They told me I had to reject him. That an omega can't be mated to another omega. That it's unnatural. But I won't, she continued more strongly. I won't reject him. I'd rather be a rogue than give up my mate. So I ran and I came here and I'm asking. She looked at Rodrigo and Paloma with desperate hope. I'm asking for sanctuary. For the chance to be with my mate without being told it's wrong. Rodrigo felt something loosen in his chest. This was why he'd fought so hard to change things. So that young wolves like Elena wouldn't have to choose between their mate and their pack. So that omegas could love each other without shame. You're welcome here, he said warmly. More than welcome. We've built a pack where wolves can be who they are, love who they love, without apology. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Thank you so much. Mateo took her hand, and the joy on his face was radiant. I was so afraid you'd choose them. That you'd reject the bond. Never, Elena said fiercely. I've spent my whole life being told what I should be, who I should mate, how I should act. I'm done listening to people who can't see past their own prejudices. She looked at him with open adoration. You're my mate, my choice, and I choose you. Watching them, Rodrigo felt the circle complete. His son had found his mate, an omega loving an omega, something that would have been unthinkable when Rodrigo was young. But it wasn't unthinkable anymore. It was possible. It was celebrated. Come on, Isabella said, grabbing Elena's other hand. Let me show you around. Fair warning. My brother is annoyingly perfect, but I've got years of embarrassing stories that might humanize him a bit. As the three young wolves headed toward the pack house, laughing and talking, Paloma leaned against Rodrigo's shoulder. We did it, she said. We actually did it. Changed the world enough that they can just be themselves. You did it, Rodrigo corrected. By refusing to give up. By fighting an unwinnable fight because our son was worth it. By showing everyone that omega strength is real. We did it together, Paloma insisted. You gave up everything you'd built to choose love. That took just as much courage. They stood there, watching their children disappear into the trees, and Rodrigo thought about that day 25 years ago when Mateo had run away and called Paloma, Mama. How that single moment had shattered his carefully constructed life and forced him to confront the truth. That he'd rejected the best thing that ever happened to him. But he'd gotten a second chance. Not everyone did. Papa, why won't you let me see Mama? Those words had destroyed his world. But they'd also saved it. Because they'd forced him to see what he'd been too blind to notice. That choosing duty over love didn't make you strong. Just made you hollow. And choosing love. Messy, complicated, inconvenient love. That was the bravest thing an alpha could do. Years later, when Rodrigo was old and Paloma's honey-brown hair had gone silver, when Mateo and Elena led the pack with their own children playing in the same streams where Rodrigo had first met his mate, someone asked him about his greatest accomplishment. Defeating the coalition that tried to destroy us, they suggested. Or maybe reforming pack structure to include all ranks. Building one of the most prosperous packs in the region. Rodrigo shook his head. My greatest accomplishment was learning to be brave enough to choose love when everyone told me to choose duty. Because everything else, the pack, the reforms, the prosperity, all of that came from that one choice. The choice to listen when my son called a rogue omega Mama. And realize that a 4-year-old saw more clearly than I did. He looked at Paloma, still beautiful to him after all these years, still the one who made his heart race. I chose a perfect Luna once. She had the right bloodline, the right connections, the right training. She was everything an alpha's mate should be, according to tradition. But she wasn't my mate. My real mate was the omega I rejected because I was too afraid to choose my heart over my head. And when my son, my beautiful gentle omega son, found her and called her Mama, before he even really knew her, He was telling me what I'd been too stubborn to see. Sometimes the perfect Luna isn't the one who looks perfect on paper. She's the one who makes you want to be better. Who fights for your children when everyone says she can't win. Who builds a life with you based on real love instead of political convenience. Rodrigo took Paloma's hand, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. I rejected the perfect Luna I chose. And I spent the rest of my life being grateful that my pup was wise enough to choose the perfect mama for himself. Because in doing so, he gave me back the only woman I ever really loved. The greatest gift, he concluded, is the second chance you don't deserve but get anyway. And the wisdom to not waste it. Paloma smiled at him, that same smile that had captured his heart decades ago by a stream. And the courage, she added, to choose love. Every single day. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Especially then, Rodrigo agreed. And somewhere in the pack house, Mateo and Elena were tucking their own pups into bed, telling them stories about their grandmother who fought an alpha to protect their father, and their grandfather who learned that being strong meant being brave enough to change. The stories would pass down through generations, not as cautionary tales about the dangers of rejecting your mate, but as hope. Hope that even when you made mistakes, even when you chose wrong the first time, love could still find a way. That prejudices could crumble. That gentleness was its own form of strength. That omegas could lead, could fight, could love each other. And that all of it was not just acceptable but beautiful. Rodrigo had thought he was choosing a perfect Luna when he selected Inmaculada. But perfection, he'd learned, was an illusion. What mattered wasn't perfect, it was real. It was messy and complicated, and sometimes involved your 4-year-old son running away to find the woman who should have been his mother all along. It was listening when that small voice said, "Mama," and recognizing that children sometimes saw truth more clearly than adults. It was being brave enough to tear down everything you'd built to rebuild it on a foundation of authenticity instead of appearance. And it was knowing with absolute certainty that every hardship, every political battle, every painful moment had been worth it. Because at the end of the day, Rodrigo de Alcántara fell asleep next to his true mate, in a pack that valued love over hierarchy, with children who were changing the world simply by being exactly who they were meant to be. The omega he'd rejected had become the Luna who saved them all. And the pup who called her mama had been right all along. Sometimes the perfect choice isn't the one that looks right. It's the one that feels right, even when the whole world tells you you're wrong. Rodrigo learned that the hard way, through rejection, regret, and the wisdom of a 4-year-old who saw more clearly than any alpha ever could. If this story touched your heart, if you believe in second chances and the courage it takes to choose love over duty, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the transformations that happen when we're brave enough to listen to our hearts instead of our fears. And remember what I asked at the beginning. Tell me in the comments what city you're watching from so I can send you that virtual hug. Because if this story taught us anything, it's that we all need connection, we all need to be seen, and we all need to know that choosing authenticity over perfection is always, always worth it. Until next time, may you have the courage to choose your own Paloma over your own Inmaculada. And may you listen when the small voices in your life tell you truths you're too afraid to hear.